Ships on vigor of the waves are skimming, barren summits to the verdant plains. Each horizon is a new beginning, rise Eldraine. Far from the fjords and the ice-cold currents, raving soar over new frontiers, songs and sagas of a fate determined.
We left off.
Here we go. So, all right, this
Part 2.
15.
What's
With
going
Micah.
on, gents?
The Micah Chronicles.
Howdy.
I think the last episode we left off, you were about to begin the tale of your space exploration contract and delve into the world of SpaceX. So why don't we get into that, Mike?
Was it SpaceX or Blackwater? Because I don't think we really went over his Blackwater time, did we?
I think
Or did we?
Space.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it. We talked about started off on whips and then went to IRI, and then after IRI took about a 7-month break in service and was up going through training up at Moyoc, and then one of the guys that was standing in front of me in line at the DFAC there at Moyoc was talking to another instructor about low pro ops, and he was like, "Hey, you wanna hop on board the select program?" And I was like, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. so I picked up on the select gig, and old Mike Sierra that we talked about.
That's right. Because you
yeah,
talked about how he screwed you. Yeah.
Which was weird, man, because everybody painted him in this picture of just being
Just clarification for those people watching: when you say he screwed you, we don't literally mean that he lubed you up and raped you.
No,
not
yeah,
physically,
like a
not
lawyer.
physically.
Oh, like
No.
the lawyer fucked me. Okay,
Yeah. Like
So-
the lawyer fucked me.
Yeah, that guy. So Mike Sierra basically turned around and painted this whole picture, and we basically gave each other permission to go fuck each other or go fuck ourselves, and it was a mutual parting of ways, shall you say.
right.
So but yeah, so after I came back, started up a security company here local to Texas, built the company up from 1 employee to 95 employees, had statewide operations. Things were going really, really well. And
That's what you were doing when I saw you out in Texas when I was out there working with Billy Coleman.
Yeah. So with Billy, and I was just telling Looney just a little bit ago before we kicked on about the about everybody that came down and went through the training, the level 2, level 3, level 4 with like Tommy Vargas and let's see who else, Mike Ramirez, Ram went through, and a few other guys went through as well. Maestro went through as well, and so yeah, I had that going for me. And one of the guys that was going through the MBA class with my CFO at the time said, "Well, hey, look, you're a veteran-owned company, and we're a veteran-owned company, and we think your line of services would be a great addition to what we offer. Would you be interested in talking about us procuring your company?" And I was like, "Shit, yes, I would be very interested in having that discussion." Because I'll be honest with you, man, it was a lot of fun, but I got burnt out so quickly, just doing all the back office and the development, and sticking with operations, and being the owner of the company, you really are married to the company. And even though I had supervisors in the different market areas, if 3 guys didn't show up for work in Austin, guess who's throwing on a pair of pants at 2 o'clock in the morning and driving his ass up to Austin? So
Right.
so they ended up buying the company off of me in 2016, and I went back into full-time law enforcement, and for about 3.5 years, and I was at one of our patrol sites, just happier than a pig in shit, just loosely trolling through LinkedIn when this weirdo that owns a space company and a car company was looking for security. And for you guys that don't know me or know enough about me, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I've got a Millennium Falcon on the back of my phone. So I'm
Back.
like, yeah, I'll throw my shit in there. So,
Nerds.
yeah, I'm a big ass nerd, man. I call it with pride. So I threw my resume in, just for shits and giggles, certainly not expecting to get a job offer within 36 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. My wife was actually sitting next to me when they called. The hiring manager and this is such a weird interview, such a cool interview because it turns out he was a former B-Dub cat, and he was like, "So let's talk about your Coast Guard experience." And I'm like, "Okay." And so we start talking about the MSST, and all of a sudden he starts throwing out names. He goes, "Hey, were you with Commander so and so's group over here?" And I was like, "No, I was with. I know who you're talking about, but no, he was the commanding officer of a sister unit. I was with this unit over here." And all of a sudden he starts calling off the my CO's call sign. My CO's call sign was Cuervo, and he goes, "You were with fucking Cuervo?" I was like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was." And it turns out that he was, the Coast Guard does very specific training out at Camp Lejeune, for those units. And it turns out that he was a second SOTG instructor at the same time that our unit was going through SMTC, which is right next door. So he knew my Charlie Oscar.
Huge.
Yeah, exactly. So he knew my Charlie Oscar really, really well. He knew a lot of we knew a lot of the same people, and he was like, "Okay, cool, that's awesome." He goes, "All right, let's talk about your B-Dub experience." Now, he didn't say Blackwater, and he didn't say BW. He said B-Dub, and that's a very intimate,
Right.
designation, with us.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, and obviously when somebody brings that up, it's going one of two ways. So the hair on the back of my neck stands up, and I was like, okay. He goes, "So you were on Select, and then IRI, and then Whips?" I was like, "No, the other way around." And he goes, "Hey, you know this guy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know that guy." He was like, "Okay, how about this guy?" I was like, "Yeah, he's a piece of shit." He was like, "That's the correct answer." So
It's
we
me, wasn't it?
yeah, by the end of the interview, we were just, telling stories, and apparently his boss was also on the line, and his boss, kind of cleared his throat, and he said, "Well, hey, look, man, here's the bottom line. We'll go ahead and let you know. We're still talking to a few other people, and we'll let you know one way or the other. Whatever decision we decide to go with." And I was like, "Well, hey, look, I really appreciate your time." He called back like 2 hours later and said, "Look, here's the thing. We've gone ahead and thrown all the other resumes away. The job is yours. Why don't you come down here to the site and see if this is going to be a good fit for you?" And I was like, "Well, shit, I'm off Thursday and Friday." He was like, "Come on down." And the beautiful thing about go ahead. Okay. All good, all good. So the beautiful thing about that organization was I was hired for a very specific purpose because they were looking for a state, not only a law enforcement trainer but a security trainer. All the state licenses and the instructor licenses that I had, because they were looking to develop their internal security capability. They were looking to build that out so they didn't have to rely on contractors as much. And when I first got there, there was like 3 buildings and like 75 people on site. And by the time I left, there was 40 something buildings and over 3,000 employees in like 11 months. And I mean, just constant expansion. I mean, just constant growth, constant expansion, constant build operations. And it was a great organization to work with. I really enjoyed my time there. And so obviously that pops up the question of, well, why did you leave? And the thing is that I was hired for a very specific purpose. And when I accomplished that purpose, the shift in what they needed from me just kind of shifted back to, something that, I wasn't hired to do. And so they were having discussions as far as, moving in different directions. And, but, we like to say in the organization that the company moves at the speed of Elon. And so when Elon and the organization is focused in a particular area, I mean, until that direction, until that paradigm shifts to a different direction. That's kind of the track we're going on. So the discussion we had was, hey, look, I'm absolutely willing to have the discussions of some of these different directions we want to move in. Let's put a pin in this. I'll head back up to San Antonio, and when that direction shifts, let's pick this conversation back up. So I started getting back into domestic, consultation, executive protection, residential security, and then about 4 years ago now, my brother and I started an investigations and protection company, and then an academy, a security academy here in Central Texas, and that's really where we've been doing a lot of our work lately. To date, I was just telling Looney that we've got a couple new laws on the books here in Texas that requires an armed officer on every public school campus in the state, and we just don't have enough police officers to fill that need. So the law allows these school districts to make an exception of having a peace officer on those campuses, and when they make that exception, they get to set their own standard on how they're going to fulfill that mandate, to include going into contracts with security companies and providing armed security officers on these school campuses. So
very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. And I mean,
I would imagine some
noble work, man. Say again?
I would imagine some of these school districts are probably opting to like arm their own teachers as well, or no?
So there's a couple of options available to them. Obviously, so the way the current law is written is you have to either be a peace officer, what's called a school marshal, or a school guardian. And a school marshal is a person that goes through a limited amount of training, like 80 hours worth of training, and they only operate in a law enforcement capacity if there's a direct threat on their school campus, but they're allowed to carry through their, under their license to carry, their concealed handgun license. And then the school guardian program it could be, a teacher, a custodian, a coach, something along those lines. They go through an even smaller amount of training, but they're also allowed to carry as well. But this new legislation allows them to actually go into contracts with armed security companies to provide those services for them.
That sort of thing I think is great in concept. I worry about the practicality of handing out weapons in the crowded school to people who may or may not be competent or proficient with the use of firearms, because once you send that fucking round, you own it.
It ain't coming back. And that's one of the things
I worry about that, because y'all know how easy it is to skirt the edges of shit like that.
Absolutely. And when it comes to arming teachers, there's two sides to that story. I mean, obviously the teachers are there in the,
and that's just you know what I mean? That's just something in my head. So
yeah. And it's a valid point, brother. You've got one side of the conversation that's saying, hey, let's arm the teachers because they're there every day. They know the issues, they know the particular issues that are going on with particular students and whatnot, and they have accessibility. But I'll tell you, every teacher that I've spoken to has no interest whatsoever in being armed. Quite the opposite, actually. Most teachers that I've spoken to have said that, look, that's not why I was hired. I was hired to, provide education. I was hired to teach English, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
And sure, and I think a lot of people got to understand that when you think about, okay, what is your motivation in going into a job? Put yourself in the shoes of being a teacher. You want to shape the minds of a student. I mean,
it's a nurturing environment.
Right. So some people would be thinking, well, wouldn't an extension of that be protecting the students? Like, well, who's thinking like that when they want to be a teacher?
Right.
I mean, we think that's a natural extension, but we're also protectors. That's how we shaped our entire existence,
Right.
So I can get that. I mean, I can understand that, that's just part of, putting yourself in that situation. And so that is a big ask. That is definitely a big, tall ask of teachers. And like Looney said, they're sitting there for the very first time. what if I miss? What if I hit a kid? You know?
Oh God, yeah. Can you imagine?
What if the threat is a kid?
Well, that there as well is there's going to be a lot of emotion involved.
I'm saying,
and you know, especially with a lack of training, not a lack of, but not a consistent amount. You know, it's just human nature.
And we
Oh
all
shit.
officer involved shootings, and they're getting better because I think in the last decade we've seen a paradigm shift between the level of training and the competency in law enforcement capacities. You know what I mean? But I mean,
Well, and this does circle back to law enforcement. Like, what is nationally speaking, Micah? What is the average amount a law enforcement officer does training with firearms?
Oh, maybe once a year, twice a year if they're lucky.
Yeah.
You know, most departments. You know, I'm lucky with my department because we train twice a year. We train biannually. You know, but everything else is on you. And unfortunately, you know, unless you are of the mindset of I need to keep my skills up, I need to grow my skills, et cetera, and you know, of the mindset that I'm probably going to have to come out of pocket and do that myself because you know my department doesn't have the funding to keep doing that for me.
And that's what pisses me off when they start talking about defunding the police, because they've already defunded the police. They've made it so
out there running around slick with no body armor because their departments can't afford it. I donated like 400 sets when we closed down a Coast Guard contract. I forget, it was some nonprofit that basically collected body armor and doled it out to, you know, departments or officers in need. Whether it was expired or not. I mean, they took even expired stuff just because anything's better than nothing. But you know, all this, you know, screaming of defunding the police, and you've got people out there that are putting their lives on the line that don't even have the equipment to protect themselves.
Right. And I remember when I first, you know,
let alone the skill set.
Right. And I remember when the big discussion started being about militarizing police departments. You'd see MRAPs for SWAT teams. And I was like, yeah, what the fuck is that about? And Tim Enlow educated me. He's like, dude, these guys are buying the shit at auction because they are already strapped for funding. So these MRAPs are going for auction, pennies on the dollar, and that's what they have access to. It's not that they want to be militarized, but that's what's cheap.
Well, not only that, but not only options, but they're also able to hit it, get it from Dermo.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You know, there's a program, you know, our department actually took part in it where you know, you're able to access, you know, a bunch of surplus military equipment, and if you don't need it anymore, then you give it back so that it can go to a department that can use it. But yeah, I mean, we're talking MRAPs, we're talking, you know, rhinos, we're talking, you know, all sorts of different armored vehicles, you know, body armor, even weapons.
Well, even just a standard patrol car, or like, you know, like the Explorer or Interceptors. I mean, that's 150 grand.
Yeah,
easy. You know, fully outfitted.
I'd say that's one thing that people that you and I worked for the last time, Dale, that thing we did with those people in that place, that was the thing that they really had, and we had mandatory training. We had to stand down. We had mandatory training, and we didn't always make it because we were overstressed, overworked, booked. But we did have mandatory training. We even got to take our clients out on the range, and we ran them through dry fires where we audibly, you know, blah blah blah, and then we would actually go red and start popping lead. You remember that one cat that curled up in the fetal position? I told that story today. You remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was kind of on the spectrum, but he was a black engineer cat.
All right, contact front. We audible, bang, 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 bang. We're going to turn. We're going to do this. You're going to do this, yada, yada, yada. We run through it a few times, right? Dry fire the thing a few times after we sand table. And then we go red. And the first rounds that go down, this guy curls up in the fetal position, hits the ground.
I think he actually was in the fetal position in the air and landed on the ground in the fetal position. I was like, it was like a cartoon. I was like, how the hell did he do that?
Like a popcorn kernel popping.
Oh, yep. It was just
In
like
reverse.
what the fuck?
Well, that's one thing I can say about this school company. I'm working with a couple of school security providers, and they're doing it right. And especially with this, especially after Uvalde, we have to do it right. We can't skimp on this, and that's one thing that this company is doing right. They're putting them through the same training and to the same standard as school-based law enforcement have to go through here in Texas.
Nice.
I do have a question for you, Micah. Just now, this is an opinion question. So, of course, the shooting that happened down in Florida, where that resource officer, and this is famous because David Hogg's little ass is so annoying for having been involved in that particular shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But that school resource officer got a lot of criticism for freezing up.
Yep.
Do you think that had something to do with his lack of frequency of training, and maybe he was concerned about where those rounds might go unaccounted for, that kind of thing? What is your opinion on that?
So I have a few different opinions, and some that I share and some that I don't. I think the deputy that was the school resource officer that was assigned to Parkland did a lot of things wrong, and I think he is going to have to live what happened due to his inactivity for the rest of his life. I think a lot was going on in his head. I think there was the concern of where his rounds could go. I think there was concern of him actually stepping into a two-way range. So I think there was a lot going on, but that's, if you're going to be assigned to a school and your role and responsibility is to protect those children, then that's what you need to be doing. And he didn't.
Right. I've got
But what I was
go ahead.
is that this goes back to what I was just about to say, and we're jumping a little bit because of our delay here. But when I told that story, if you'd have asked that guy 5 minutes before that happened, if you'd have asked him before we started slinging dead, before we went red, if you'd have asked him, he would have been comfortable. He would have been competent. He knew what he was doing. He understood what was happening. That cop was the same way. If you asked him before he went to that shooting, I guarantee you he would not have stood there and told you, I'm incompetent, I will not be able to respond, I'm not sure what I'm doing, and I'm scared shitless. He would not have said that.
Well, and the reason why I asked you, Micah, is because you're the closest thing we have to an expert opinion. But I also ask you with the understanding, what a lot of people don't understand is that they'll Monday morning quarterback, they'll armchair quarterback to death from a totally uneducated standpoint while they're watching the news on Monday morning, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then they'll come to people like us and they'll ask opinions, and I'll look at them and say, look, man, what do you want me to say? I wasn't fucking there. I don't know what that guy was like. I don't know what his training records look like. I don't know what his actual proficiency was. I don't know what the scene looked like to him at that moment.
Right.
You want me to give you answers of education based upon my experiences and my knowledge, but I wasn't there. It could be, if I was there, it might have been a totally different scene that I'd be like, well, fuck, I might have made the same decisions, but I don't know. Now, I do have opinions, like you said, that I won't share,
right?
Because I also know my level of experience, proficiency, and training. And this is where I tell people, like when they start having gun debates, they go, well, don't you think we should mandate training? And I'm like,
well, so
I want to say yes, but I also want to say, as soon as you mandate it, it becomes expensive and prohibitive to poor people. So I don't want to say yes, let's mandate it. So it's a slippery slope. But again,
to what standard do we mandate training?
Exactly.
So that's
in Virginia, you have to get your CCW, you have to show that you've gone through a handgun proficiency course of some sort, either military career or a private deal that you have to pay for, but you have to show up with a certificate.
Which is still which is still technically a violation of your Second Amendment rights because that is an infringement.
Correct, 100%. Now, given that, if you walk in Virginia and you say, I want to get my CCW, and they say, what's the purpose? Your answer can just be because it's my right, and they'll go, okay. So, whereas California is a lot different. I remember my dad, he had to jump through hoops as a business owner and show that he carried, certain amounts of cash consistently and all of that in order for him to carry his firearm. And this was somebody that was world's fastest at quick draw at one point. I mean, he was very proficient, but he had to jump through all of these hoops for the state of California to carry his fucking pistol.
Right. Fucking stupid.
Yeah.
God bless Texas.
And a total, oh, yeah, absolutely. God bless Texas.
Well, only recently, though. Only recently.
Oh, yeah, with constitutional carry. Yep.
Yeah.
Texas
It was a couple years ago.
Carry, though.
Well,
Texas,
yeah, because I was going to say they didn't even have
though.
open carry. Yeah, they didn't have open carry a couple years ago.
No,
right?
They did.
They did. Yep.
Oh,
So
did
what
they? Did they have open carry?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but it was still under. You still had to have a license to carry. So you still had to have a license. They changed the terminology from concealed handgun license, a CHL, to an LTC, a license to carry. And they did that because they opened things up and said, okay, well, look, we can't tell you how to carry. If you have the right to carry, then you have the right to carry, anyway. Now they also did come back and say, but private property owners have a right to either allow or not allow weapons on their property. So, when they came back and changed things up with LTC and said that you can either carry concealed or open carry, then they changed things up on the private property laws as well. And now private property owners had to have 2 signs on their entries that said you can either not carry concealed or not carry open. And if you had both of those signs, then you were given effective notice that you couldn't carry in that private property.
Georgia,
Georgia's
pretty much the same way. In Georgia, we got concealed carry licenses. They just went to open, constitutional, and all that shit. I don't know all the details, but I know in the state of Georgia, if I go to your business and you have a sign on the door that says no weapons allowed, I cannot enter that legally. You don't have a permit. I can go in, but you can also have me processed for trespassing.
Right. Well, and it gets a little tricky there.
Doesn't make my weapon illegal, but you can get me with a trespassing charge.
Yeah.
Right.
But
So
it's still in effect for public owned buildings, courthouses, etc.
Right.
So I think New York is like the opposite of that. It's implied that any business you can't carry it in, and then you have to post it if you do allow it or some shit like that.
Don't even.
They have like no go zones in New York too, right?
Well, yeah, like in New York City, you're not supposed to have handguns and all of that.
Well, they changed it. I think in New York City, because it was, even if you had a concealed carry in the state of New York City, you couldn't carry there even with it. But I think they changed it. And so what they did was they made no-go zones within the city, and they almost kind of blanketed it like where all the tourist spots are at.
Well, and what's funny though is it's so ambiguous that they don't even know the law. Because I was trying to set up a training exercise with NSW in New York City, and I was going to have to transport close to 100 weapons up there. They were all either blanks. I mean, the AKs were fully operational, but they had BFAs on them, and we only had blank ammo. And then we had M4s that were set up with sim rounds. But the AK mags were real magazines, and so I called up. I didn't want to get popped, because you're going to have 5 15 passenger vans with a bunch of role players. So I didn't want to get popped at like one of the bridges. So I call up NYPD. They tell me, oh, you need to call up New York State Police. I call up New York State Police. I got the runaround, and nobody could give me a solid answer on what would happen if I got pulled over with, a fucking Pelican case full of 15 AKs.
Last time,
it's crazy.
The last time I worked in New York City, It was bad. It was bad. I don't know all the rules and I don't know all the fucking details, but I know everything I did was I complied with every legal scenario there was. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But it was very difficult. I'll say I didn't break any laws knowingly. Oh my God. Senator, I was not aware, sir.
More surprised than I.
Sounds like when the colonel called me in his office that day, right?
All right. Well, so kind of going back, so you're running the training program now. Well, I mean, at least part of the training program for getting these educators and special law enforcement officers for the school system.
These are commissioned security officers. These are civilian commissioned security officers. But like I said, we're putting them through the same level of training that school-based law enforcement officers have to go through. They have to go through active shooter response training. They have to go through school-based law enforcement basic. We put them through IS 100. I see them. There they are. IS 100 and 200. So that they have an understanding of, if something happens, and you've got, different organizations that are starting to, pop up on your campus, where do you fit in the whole totem pole? So we're, they're doing it right. And like I said before, when it comes to this, we have to do it right. Go ahead, Looney. Go ahead, brother.
Go ahead and throw this out. Not only am I a client, I'm also a member. No, his degree as well, so I could teach and still shoot a couple of kids here and there too, if that's on the table. I'm not saying I want to shoot kids. Saying I don't. I'm leaving that up to you, if you get what I'm saying. Here's my
role players.
In it, maybe there's not any money in
it. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. So no, like I said, we've just since mid-June, we've trained over 100 new security officers in this. So the company that's the main company that we're working with a couple different companies, but the main company we're working with is putting them through an academy like setup. So in Texas, we have level 2, level 3, level 4 security officers that are certifications provided by the state. And then beyond that, so not only are they going through the full gambit of qualification training through the state, so level 2, level 3, level 4, again, they're also being trained beyond that in active shooter response, school-based law enforcement, IS 100 and 200, crisis negotiations, advanced report writing and documentation.
So with the officers that are coming in, are they all regional, or are they coming in like from across the state right now?
So again, we're working with a couple of different companies. One company is pretty much staying, pretty local, but the main company we're working with, the largest company we're working with, they're talking to districts all over the state. So here in the Central Texas area, from the San Antonio up into New Braunfels, San Marcos, south of Austin, east of Austin into Bastrop, all the way down into the Rio Grande Valley. Down close to Brownsville, McAllen, and through that whole area as well. So, right now,
you're gonna do mobile training, or are they gonna kind of come to you?
No, I'm going to them. So,
nice.
I've got my brother and I both are conducting training. And with our academy, we've got a very nimble market process. So we have the ability of doing not only mobile training teams, but semi permanent mobile training teams, so where we can go down to an area and set up for 3 weeks and conduct training down in that area and have local guys come to that area, because it's a lot more cost efficient to have a couple of instructors go down to an area than to pay for 20-25 students to come up to San Antonio 5 hours up the road, to come up to San Antonio, and all the lodging and meals and all that other stuff, because all that stuff is being provided.
Nice.
Like we used to do the Chileans and just pitch some tents, huh?
Yep.
I think that's great, and I think what the problem is from logically from a standpoint of the outside looking in, the optics on that thing. Bad guys can be wrong almost every time. We can't be wrong once.
Correct.
And when we are wrong, the 99 times we were right become irrelevant. And the light is shown specifically on that one time. And that's the outrage that you see. That's the outrage that you see. You don't see them talk about the times where they've mitigated in positive manner, where they've dealt with these things before it got out of hand. The only thing that ever gets cast is that one failure. And that's what we're always judged by. So
that's the chicken beak and the nugget.
In my opinion, there is no way to pull off any of this without an acceptable degree of failure, from a realistic standpoint, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, it's going to happen. Back to the. Go ahead, brother.
That we have to be absolutely perfect, and we're not, because we're all human beings, and you know what I mean. But we don't give people that room to be human beings in these scenarios, and I don't know how you mitigate that in a public perspective or a public perception sort of perspective. You know what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense to anybody?
I know exactly what you're saying.
It does.
Absolutely.
Well, because and nobody knows. That was my biggest fear when I first went over working in Iraq, was I didn't know how I'd react to contact until you actually fucking did it.
Right.
You can train for it all day long, but like the dude that fell into the fetal position, and that wasn't even a two-way range, but you never know. And so, you could give them all the training, but that's not going to take that human quotient out, like you're talking, where all of a sudden their emotions kick in, or they are scared for their life and they fucking freeze.
Yeah.
It's just that there's no, I'm trying to word this right, and I think you guys know me well enough to know that I'm not being malicious when I say this. There's no acceptable degree of loss in terms of public perception.
No, yeah.
Is that there's going degrees of loss.
What you're saying is that this is nothing but ammo for the left, the anti-gunners, right? It's kind of what you're alluding to.
Ammo, but I think that there is ammo inherently built into any scenario we devise.
Right.
Correct.
100%. There's no system. Take a look at what we did with Blackwater. Look at all the good that we did. I know that people are alive because of my intervention and guys that I know, but we're never judged by that. We're always judged by that one thing, and y'all know what I'm talking about. That's what we're judged by. Yeah. And so, take for example, there was I'm gonna tell you this real quick. There's a thing on TikTok, and it was a video of some pro golfer, and he's like walking, and he winds up hitting one of the ropes that they have to cross to get, that keeps the crowd back. I guess he's like hitting the ball on the wrong side, and he's trying to go under it, and somebody holds it up. He winds up hitting him in the face, and he goes down, and he's like, pitching a fit. Well, then the caddy comes over to hand him a towel, and he like snatches the towel like a little bitch. So you could tell he's being a fucker. You know what I mean? So I make a comment on there. I'm like, look, I served multiple tours, Iraq, Afghanistan. This is one of the most horrific injuries I've ever seen. Because he's a fucker. And all these people are like, oh man, that's awesome. It's like 12,000 fucking likes on that one comment all of a sudden. And but there's like 4 or 5 in there that are like, how'd you like killing innocent civilians?
Oh my God.
Babies, and
what are we even talking about? Of course, now I'm like, I fucking love killing innocent civilians. It's too, I'm doing shit like that just to be a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
But
it's great. They don't shoot back.
I didn't hear you, bud.
I said it's great. They don't shoot back.
Listen, with the car. What are you talking about? Now, But no matter what we did good, judged by that bad. So you got all these fucking twat waffles out here that are like, oh, well, you're baby killers and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, get the fuck out of here, man.
And Looney, you bring up a good point. I mean,
Literally count millions I've killed on two hands. You know what I'm saying?
You bring up a fantastic point of even in law enforcement, there is no allowable loss. I bring this up in the class that in law enforcement, our uses of force are only going to be up to the amount and up to the level that the community deems appropriate. There's just a couple years ago in the Chicago area, there was a it's called, if you want to look at a case study on this, look up the Van Dyke shooting. It's called the McDonald Van Dyke shooting in Chicago. I want to say it was 2019. McDonald was several calls came into 911 that this cat named McDonald was going around threatening people with a knife. So they deployed units to the area to find this guy. They were looking around for a good while, couldn't find anybody that matched the description. So they ended up calling unable to locate, and so the primary unit in that area kind of went off into like a parking lot or whatever to do some admin time or whatever. Well, McDonald ends up coming up behind them in the vehicle, and he starts jabbing the vehicle, popping the tires with the knife, telling him he's going to kill him. And the officers inside the car deemed that they were safer staying in the car than getting out and engaging with him. So they get on the radio and say, hey, he's over here at our car. He's slashing at the car. He's jabbing, the tires with the knife, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get some backup over here. And the backup unit showed up, and Officer Van Dyke, they roll in 2-man units. Officer Van Dyke was the passenger in the backup unit. And for whatever reason, the driver of the backup unit pulled the car right up to the subject, like with no standoff distance. And so So when Van Dyke, stepped out of the car, the dude, exactly. So McDonald comes around and immediately starts, approaching him with the knife. So he pulls out his Glock and unloads a magazine. And he was charged with murder and 15 counts of aggravated. Yes. Officer Van Dyke was charged with murder and 15 counts of aggravated battery.
For each round.
And they ended because the jury of his peers from that community said that he did not, give any identification. He didn't say he was a police officer, et cetera, et cetera. And they convicted him.
The man came at him with a knife.
And after several calls to 911, after the other officers are saying that he was slashing at their vehicle and they felt that it was safer for them to stay inside their vehicle, after all of that, he was charged with murder and 15 counts of aggravated battery, 1 count for every round in that magazine.
Oh God.
And he was convicted of manslaughter. So he's charged with murder. They brought it down to manslaughter, but they kept the 15 counts of aggravated battery. I want to say they gave him like 3.5 years in jail, and he's either coming up on the end of that sentence or has just finished that sentence. I mean, it was pretty recently.
And you know what? And you know what, Micah? I mean, I'd actually like to hear your opinion, having been in law enforcement and been one of our brothers on this. But when I look at some of the optics of this defund the police movement and some of this prosecuting the police the way, I mean, listen, I know that there are idiot cops out there, but I also know, having brothers from our community that are law enforcement officers, no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. So I know that too.
Absolutely.
So when I see some of this that's happening, the one thing that sticks in my brain that I keep going back to is this is all orchestrated in an attempt to federalize law enforcement. That's what I keep thinking of.
I can see that.
So
see the argument for that. Let me say that.
I can see the logic behind the argument. I'll be 100% transparent. I don't feel that it's exactly to that level. I think a lot of what you're seeing in the media is media driven. And of course, I believe that there are handlers that are working the media to put out specific narratives.
Mhm.
But I don't get
Well, and
too
it's
deep in. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's a semi easy narrative for folks to jump onto that bandwagon though, because for the vast majority of people, unless they're a victim of a crime, their interaction with law enforcement is not positive. They're getting a ticket, they're it's one thing or another. So they already are like, oh, these fucking dudes, they're giving me a ticket. It's kind of a negative interaction to begin with. So it's an easy one for folks to jump onto, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not
And
saying it's right, but
We don't
well,
give
and you also, just like Dale brought up, um, you've got a lot of instances where not only do you have that one incident, think about it. When was the last time you got pulled over and got a ticket or got a warning? And
it. Come get me.
yeah, I mean, think about it. When you look at the stats, there's over 8 million people in the country. 8 million. And there were,
I thought it was more like a million. Maybe I had.
You're talking about that are law enforcement?
no, I'm talking about nationwide. Nationwide. I want to say, hold up, I'll pull it up.
Are you talking about getting pulled over per day? 8 million
Yeah.
getting pulled. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, but how many of those are actually going hands on? How many of those are actually going to gun? I mean, less than 0.00001%.
For the point,
But
you're judged
yeah,
by the failure.
absolutely.
yeah.
And I'll be the first to admit, as a cop, as an active law enforcement officer, I will tell you that there are motherfuckers who are not qualified to tie their own goddamn shoes who are carrying a badge and a gun.
You know why they won't be a gun, right?
But there is a certain level of stupidity, with any cross section of the community, and law enforcement really is a cross section of the community. So and you're going to have your 1%, of any industry, whether it's law enforcement, Wall Street, educators, contractors. We all know that we've worked with the best dudes in the world, but we also know that we've worked with a couple of complete assholes.
Did you ever notice though, Micah, that there's only two professions when they fuck up on their off time? When they fuck up in their off time, that you hear about them in the news, and they're what two professions?
Cops and teachers.
Nope. Cops and military.
Oh yeah.
Cops and military
for sure.
That's the only time you hear their profession, when they fuck up on their off time.
But here's what I was going to say. You're a human being. I'm a human being. If I go out as a cop, I get up in the morning, I kiss my kids, I get in the vehicle, I go to work, right? I'm dealing with the same fucking traffic you are. You're getting frustrated, I'm getting frustrated. Now I got all the shit throughout my fucking day, all the shit at my home, maybe my wife's on my ass. I'm not giving excuses, trying to get you to understand cops are human beings. Now I go pull some cat over, right? And maybe something negative happens, right? Maybe this guy starts shooting, maybe we get into a chase, maybe this, whatever the fuck is going on, right? My levels are up. Or imagine for a moment that you and I are partners, right? And we go out and I get gunned down, right? And you see that, right? And now later on, maybe a year down the road, you're doing traffic stops. You're not going to forget me getting gunned down. And every fucking time you go to that car, you're waiting on that next goddamn thing. You know what I mean? And people give people reason for that. Now you got all these fucking cunts with TikToks and Twitters and all this Snapchat and all this other fucking bullshit. And they're legitimately trying to instigate a negative response so that they can get goddamn clicks. And so they're acting like fucking assholes, and they're spurring all this shit up so they can get YouTube views. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or try and get a lawsuit.
Yeah. Yep. We call them, they call themselves auditors down here, these First and Second Amendment auditors. I refuse to use that term with them. So I'm YouTube famous on a couple of them myself.
I've seen a few of them that they actually go about it the right way, but I've seen some where you're like, well, no wonder you're getting that reaction. You're a fucking prick.
Okay, I'm
Right.
not talking about guys that won't consent to a search that's illegal. I'm not talking about guys
Right.
right thing. I'm talking about the motherfuckers that want to get taken,
Oh,
want to
Right.
get the car, that want that shit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Well, you know what? And you guys know that I've made my mistakes with law enforcement, but I also know how I'm viewed by law enforcement. I'm a big fucker that has a certain appearance. And so when I get approached by law enforcement, I don't make any sudden moves. If that law enforcement says, hey, I want you to get out of the car, guess what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to get out of that fucking car. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to comply with this motherfucker's commands because listen, at the end of the day, like let's say this guy is saying, I feel uncomfortable and I need to put him in cuffs. Okay. There's no amount of whatever I'm about to say and no physical action that's going to change this motherfucker's mind.
It's going to exacerbate.
This guy, he's made a decision that nothing else is going to change except making it worse.
Imagine
And
some booger size pulling me over.
right. I mean,
you know what I mean? Funny, but
I'm tasing you.
Ability that's there right off the fucking bat.
Yeah.
You know,
and look, in full transparency, after the Bundy Ranch, Harry Reid made sure all of us got put on the NCIC background check, whatever that thing is called. Like, I pop up looking like I'm Jason fucking Bourne in there. Like, the cops will always tell me, no, I mean, no shit. They come up to me and they literally will have their hands on their guns or one drawn. And my hands are clearly on the steering wheel. And I sit there I'm like, how you doing, officer? And then they're like, hey, you got your driver's license, this and that? And I said, I sure do. And they're like, where's it at? And I said, well, it's either in my center console or in my hip or whatever. And they're like, okay, are you armed? And if I was, I'd be like, yeah, it's, under my seat or, on my hip or wherever. Like, okay, just don't pull your gun. And I said, cool. Or if I'm not, I'm like, no, I'm not armed. But whatever it is, I'm letting them know exactly what they need to know to make them feel comfortable. And then after I get done with the interaction, they'd be like, hey, just so you know, you pop up as being considered hostile to law enforcement. I said, I know what's in there. And I said, and I know why it's in there. And just so you know, what do you feel about me? And they're like, well, you seem pretty reasonable. And I'm like, well, and I tell them what the deal is. And they're like, oh, well, that's fucked up. And I said, yeah, and that's why I keep my hands visible, because you might be a rookie who might be a little gun happy today.
How many times downrange were we in motorcades and it's like, hey, we need to, skinny pedal on the right, blast out of here. And it's like, no, hold up. You see that guy over there? You see that 18-year-old on that big piece of equipment over there? Yeah, let's just not.
Right.
Let's throw the VS17 panel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm the same as you. My hands are on the steering wheel. They come
Yeah.
troopers all the time in Georgia because they still do ID checks. They still do license checks. And they'll be like, hey, man, how you doing? I'm good, bud. How you doing? You got any weapons on you? Yes, sir. How many? Several. And I said, I'm licensed to carry. All right. I need your ID, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right. My ID's in my wallet. And I got a sidearm too. I want you to know that. I can get out and you can put handcuffs on me if you want to, and you can get it. Or however you want to do it. You tell me what makes you comfortable. You know what I mean? And they're like,
right.
No, go ahead. And I lean over and I go for my wallet and I pull everything out. You know what I mean? And I hand it to them. But I don't go digging around in the goddamn dash while they're shining the back windshield.
Exactly.
Well, and that goes a long way too, because you've taken that doubt out of their mind. You've declared it. You're like, hey, dude, I'm armed just like you, And then he's like, okay, you're clearly not going to let him know that if you've got ill intent,
But what annoys me is when motherfuckers go, oh, well, that's your white privilege. I'm like, I'm sorry. Did you hear everything I just went through to make this motherfucker comfortable? because he doesn't see my skin color. He sees the big motherfucker that he might have to shoot. That's all he sees.
Mhm.
And Booger's got little privilege. We don't.
Meanwhile, pretty much all of my interactions with law enforcement in official capacity, I was drunk off my ass, and they did go hands on.
Like,
I'm
brother,
wiry.
don't get mad. Like, please don't. I'm gonna have to shoot you. I cannot take. Like, I mean, yeah. So I get it, man. So
I think I asked one of our guys at Blackwater, who was a law enforcement before he came down range. I said, so did you ever have to operate with those tasers and all that stuff? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so you ever have to tase anybody my size? And he looked me dead in the eyes, and he goes, oh, I'm going to be honest with you. Somebody your size, your background, we ain't tasing.
No.
And I was like, oh. And he's like,
Oh.
just so you know, you're getting the Glock. You ain't getting the tase. You're too fucking big to take that chance.
I'll tell you what, though, man. I've had situations where where we get out of the car, like, because I'm a field training officer, and so I'm training new guys coming into the department, fresh out of the academy and whatnot. And we had a couple of situations where my trainee, he hops out, and we've got a call that we've got an individual with a gun that's getting off of one of the transit buses, and so we ID where this is at. We ID the bus that this dude was supposed to be on. We watch him get off the bus. We make a U-turn, come back around. He's got lethal, and he didn't see me get out of the other side of the truck, but I had my taser out, because a lot of times what we'll do is, if they don't have their gun in their hand, we'll have lethal coverage, and then we'll have another officer that's got less lethal coverage. And so he never reached for anything, but my trainee had his Glock out and was telling him to get on the ground. The dude's like, "What? You gonna fucking shoot me? You gonna shoot me?" And I was like, I put the laser on him, and I was like, "I will." He was like, "Oh shit, no, don't do that, man. Don't do that." He gets down on the ground, prones out. He's like, I know you'll tase me. He probably won't shoot me, but I know you'll tase me." So he prone right out. He had no issues with him whatsoever anymore.
a weapon to shoot them. They obviously don't understand the rules of the game like we do. Because if you did that shit to me, well, you know what I'm trying to say. I mean,
right.
Guys like us, we think differently because we know what that is. We know if I did that to Dale, he'd put a fucking round in me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But these guys out here, they just don't think you're going to do it. And then when you do it, they like, I can't believe you had to shoot that guy. He was such a nice church-going, knitted sweaters for on Sunday.
Or why didn't you shoot him in the leg? Or why didn't you, something along those lines? Yeah, I mean, like you said, man, there's
rule. I told a guy here today, he was like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, listen to me. I'm going to fucking rape you. If it comes to that point, I'm going to rape you. Because you're not going to report me to the cops. You're not going to go to the cops and say a man raped me. You're too pussy for that. So that's the safest crime I could ever commit, is raping you. So don't fuck with me, because I'll rape you. Not because I'm gay, because I'm establishing dominance. It's basic dominance. Now, psychopath.
You are a psychopath, Lenny, but we love you anyway.
Just remember, John Wayne Gacy also was a clown for children too.
Psychopath.
Hey, was that a dig on me? $10 an hour, man. Worst fucking year of my life.
Damn it.
I need through my truck stop too.
Yeah, right.
No, that's Maestro. Remember, that's Maestro.
No. That was an inside joke from earlier. How me and Booger first met. Oh,
well,
shit.
gents, I really appreciate it. This has been a ton of fun, guys. I really appreciate the invite to come on and just kind of talk a little bit about what we're doing, about what Paratus Critical Skills Academy is doing down here in Texas. I think you know, there's several organizations out there that want to do the right thing and their hearts are in the right place. And, you know, Looney, you got a good point, man. I mean, there's, you know, are there going to be fuck ups? Yeah. You know, but when you look at the Texas Education Agency's website and see that there's over 300,000 public school campuses here in the state of Texas, and then switch over to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, who regulates LE here in Texas, and we've only got 93,000 active peace officers. If you took every single peace officer off the street and put them on a campus, you're still only talking a third of the campuses. So,
Wow.
you know, these guys are, you know, they're taking the training seriously, they're taking the responsibility seriously, and you know,
You a good
we
catalyst.
are thrilled to be working with them.
Yeah, it gives you a good catalyst to start with, and none of this was in any way designed to be derogatory toward
No,
them.
not at all, brother.
It's very noble, and I think that as the game evolves, I think our tactics are also going to have to evolve, and we all know how that's played out in our other lives, and I think that the same holds true here. I don't think that the democratic approach of removing guns, blah blah, none of that shit. You know what I mean? We've got to match. We've got to match the threat. We've got to be more aggressive. We've got to be more prepared, and we've got to be more diligent, and we've got to be more willing to act. And it needs to be fast, and it needs to be quick, and it needs to be without any sort of, you know what I mean? Like there doesn't need to be discussion.
Well, and the balance to that is people need to know that there's repercussions.
Yep.
So
You know.
At the very least, you know, once the criminal starts feeling like there's less safe spaces to go to and commit their act without the repercussions, then they start rethinking their tactics. They start
100%.
Yeah, they start taking their action somewhere else, at least, like to where somebody's hanging a sign, "No guns allowed here." You know.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's exactly what happened with the Memphis shooting. You know, the shooter at the private school in Memphis originally was targeting another school, but because there was armed, uniformed officers out front, they decided to go to another school that they had gone to, and that was the outcome of their second target. So it's demonstrated.
Never going to stop somebody who's in evil intent. They're
No.
going to find a way. Period. End of story.
Yep.
Anybody that's willing to trade their life for a cause is very difficult to stop. But I think you're on the right track, and I commend you for it. And I'm glad we did this, and I really appreciate you coming. And
real quick, what's the name of your company again?
Paratus Critical Skills Academy and Paratus Investigations and Protection in San Antonio, Texas.
You have
And
a
we'll have a
website?
link in the description.
I do. www.weareparatus, Paratus.com.
Awesome. People,
Yep.
Micah Hoevelman.
hey, could you
Thanks, gents. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, guys. I really do appreciate it.
It was an awesome experience,
Absolutely.
brother.
You crazy fuckers, man. I'm looking forward to more of these down the line, bros. Y'all be good, all right?
this
Absolutely.
is too right?
All right, boys. Y'all be good.
All right. We'll see y'all.
Take care.